Hello YouTube, Dave here again. Today I'm going to be flipping through and sharing my early thoughts on Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. This was sent to me by Wizards of the Coast for the purposes of doing this review. However, they are not influencing the review. They're not paying for the video. They are not pre-screening it before it goes live. So the opinions that I express in this video are 100% completely and totally my own. So this is the second in the Everything series, I guess, because the last book like this one was Xanathar's Guide to Everything. So this is a book that is heavy on new options for all of the existing classes that were presented in the player's handbook. So this is a major expansion for players to, change up their characters a bit or have new abilities that they can access. There's also some other things for DMs in here as well. There's like a section on riddles, new magic items, and a whole bunch of things in here. So I'm going to flip through it and share my thoughts on it. So let's just dive right into it, shall we? Oh, actually, first, I should mention the retail price here. The US retail price is $49.95, and the Canadian retail price is $65.95. So let's just get right into it, shall we? All right, so there are 4 chapters in all. Chapter 1 is character options. Then we have a section on group patrons, magical miscellany, which includes new spells, items, information on personalizing spells. And then we have a section for Dungeon Master's tools, which have some pretty interesting things in here. But let's just, like I said, just sort of get right into it. The first section here just gives you a little bit of information on what's in the book, as well as some things to remind or to remember when you're getting ready to run games or anything like that. So these are just basic, useful little things that is always good to sort of keep in the back of your mind. Useful advice again for beginners. So here we have character options. So the first few abilities that we have here are all about customizing aspects of your character, particularly your character's abilities granted by your choice of player character race. So these are ones that you do need to clear with your Dungeon Master. So these are not something that is considered to be a set in stone rule that is just a standard part of the game from now on. These are optional things that your DM does need to approve. The first one to discuss is here are adjusting your ability score increases or your improvements. So, for example, a dwarf will get +2 to their constitution and then +1 to either like strength, depending on which sub-race of dwarf they are, or wisdom. So with this option, the idea is that, not all dwarves would be, the hardy, healthy, strong types necessarily. Like you may be someone that has a completely different background from the typical, what you consider to be a standard typical dwarf. So it just lets you choose where that +2 modifier goes and where that +1 modifier goes, provided that they do not go into the same stat. So you can't increase an ability by 3, you have to increase one stat by 2 and one by 1. So I'll touch on that sort of when I get to the opinion part of the video. But there is that. There's also swapping out proficiencies and a chart that you can use to determine what proficiency you can swap for another. So you can swap a skill for a skill. Armor, you can swap out an armor proficiency for a simple martial weapon or a tool proficiency. And then simple weapons, you can swap for another simple weapon or a tool. Martial proficiency, you can swap for a simple or martial weapon or a tool. And then a tool you can swap for a tool proficiency or a simple weapon proficiency. There's also information on changing skills. So if you took training in a skill that you're just not using, when you reach a level where you gain an ability score increase, you could choose to change a proficiency in the skill that you're not using into another. Again, optional thing, discuss it with your DM. And then there's information on changing your class's subclass. So this involves taking time and spending gold. Again, this is optional. Your DM might change those expectations, but generally speaking, you have to spend a number of days training equal to twice the level in the class that you've just gained. and 100 gold pieces times the level of the class that you're trying to change the subclass in. So if you're 6th level, you have to spend 12 days training, and you have to spend 600 gold, and you'd have to find a trainer, and depending, the DM may also require that you go on a quest of some sort in order to actually make that change. So there's some stuff there to consider. Then we get into our class information. So here we have the Artificer. This was presented in the Eberron campaign setting. It is reprinted here. I don't think there's any major differences. There was none that I could spot at a quick glance. If I'm wrong, please correct me in the comments below. I suspect that it would include any errata that may have been incorporated, but it looks like pretty much everything else is more or less the same. But yeah, so we have that in here, and again, I think there's a specific reason for it. I'll sort of touch on that again a little bit later. And then we get into the new options for the existing classes. So I'm not going to go through every single one. I may talk about each class's new features in a separate video, depending on the time that I have and the energy that I have to do it. The last few weeks, I'm not going to lie, have been pretty rough, so we'll see sort of how that shapes up. But each class will have, generally speaking, some new optional class features that you can add on to your existing class features at the levels that they give them here. A few of them will actually require a substitution, but for the most part, they are generally just extra things that you can do. So for example, with the Barbarian, we have the Primal Knowledge ability at 3rd level. It doesn't replace anything, you can get it at 3rd level. So it says when you reach 3rd level and again at 10th, you gain proficiency in one skill of your choice from the skills listed in the Barbarian class options at the beginning of the Barbarian section of the player's handbook. And then we have Instinctive Pounce at 7th level. So it says as part of the bonus action you take to enter your rage, you can move up to half your speed. So if you have a speed of 40, and when you rage, you can move 20 feet as part of that bonus action, and then you can take the rest of your movement, and even make an attack depending. So there are those. For the most part, these are generally speaking pretty, nice little extras. I don't think any of them are too far, overpowered. I mean, being 7th level and getting to move up to half your speed as a bonus action isn't that bad compared to, like a rogue who can just take a full move as a bonus action. So I don't think that's too bad there. Then we have some primal paths. So we have Path of the Beast, which is basically, a mild shape-shifting thing where you develop these like natural weapons, and they make different attacks with them. You have stuff like this Infectious Fury, where you can hit someone and then incite either like a bloodlust in them that causes them to just lash out at someone nearby, or they could take psychic damage from the invasion of this like bestial feral nature. It's kind of interesting. We also have the Path of the Wild Mage. So this is not a spellcasting barbarian. They don't get a spell list or spells per day or anything, but they have like this Wild Surge ability. So this magical energy boiling inside of you sometimes erupts from you. When you enter a rage, roll on the wild magic table to determine the magical effect produced. If it requires a saving throw, it's 8 plus your proficiency bonus plus your con modifier. So you actually get the table here, and it's an interesting concept, and it makes a better use of the wild magic table than, say, the wild bloodline for the sorcerer, which has a very small chance of needing to use the chart unless you house rule anything. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. There's the chart. If you want to take a look at it, you can just pause the video and give it a read. But yeah, it's an interesting concept. It's better than something like, say, the Rage Mage Prestige class from 3rd edition or 3.5. It also works really well with the Forgotten Realms, because you can have things like the Spell Plague, or just wild magic areas that have existed in the setting. So it works really well for that. You may have to do a little bit more work to incorporate into other settings, but it is an option. So here we have the Bard next. The Bard, again, I'm not going to go through all their abilities. If you want to read through them, like I said, you can just pause the video and hopefully you'll be able to see everything perfectly fine. But a lot of the spellcasting classes actually have an additional number of spells that you can add to their spell list. Again, it is optional. You do have to clear it with the Dungeon Master, but I don't see any reason to not give them the extra spells. Just personally, it's something that I would never, think to prevent them from doing. It's just like back in the day, whenever you'd have a new book that came out with new spells, it's just assumed that it's, a spell on the list for the classes that, it's designed for. So you got those. And again, we have some different optional features. And then we have the College of Creation, which basically they can create like these motes, energy motes of potential that can affect a player character or an ally when they're making certain types of rolls. You can create like this dancing weapon. There's just a lot of interesting stuff there. There's also the College of Eloquence, which sort of uses like wordplay and persuasive arguments and charm, stuff like that. Again, it seems interesting. Haven't read through it in full yet. Again, I'll save that probably for the full review. Cleric, we have again additional cleric spells, some new options like cantrip versatility at 4th level. Whenever you reach a level that grants you an ability score increase, you can swap out one of your cantrips that you learned, as long as it's on your spell list. Blessed Strikes, so this is one that actually replaces a feature. So this replaces Divine Strike or Potent Spellcasting feature. So it says you're blessed with Divine Might in battle. When a creature takes damage from you, when a creature takes damage from one of your cantrips or weapon attack, so it applies to cantrips as well. You can also deal an additional 1d8 radiant damage to the creature. Once you deal this damage, you can't use this feature again until the start of your next turn. So it is once per round, but it is kind of a neat ability, and yeah, it's something that I would probably allow. Then we have the Order Domain, which I want to say that this was in the Ravnica book. I could be wrong. It just looks familiar. I haven't read the Ravnica book in a little bit. So if it is, like I said, I'll mention it in either a pinned comment or when I get to the full review. There's also the Peace Domain. The Peace Domain is again sort of an interesting one. There's one ability that seems kind of odd. So the first thing, they get like this ability called Emboldening Bond. So you basically, as an action, you choose a number of creatures within 30 feet of you equal to your proficiency bonus. You create a magical bond among them for 10 minutes or until you use this feature again. While any bonded creatures within 30 feet of another, so it doesn't have to be within 30 feet of you, just 30 feet within another bonded creature, they can roll a d4 and add that to an attack roll, ability check, or saving throw. So it's kind of like a bless spell that you don't have to waste a spell slot on. And I think the purpose behind this is simply to allow to not use your concentration spell on that and just have it as an ability if you take this domain. So like I said, it's an interesting one, and you have to do a long rest to get it back, to get the uses of it back. But yeah, again, it's kind of neat. The other ability here, I like the ability, but the name is weird. So it says Balm of Peace. So it's Channel Divinity. But it says use your Channel Divinity to make your presence a soothing balm, which that just seems kind of weird. But as an action, you move up to your speed without provoking opportunity attacks. If you move within 5 feet of another creature, then you can heal 2d6 plus your Wisdom modifier to them. A creature that receives the healing can only do it once whenever you take this action, so you can't just circle around someone and keep healing them every 5 feet, every 5 foot step. Like I said, it's an interesting ability. I like the ability, but man, referring to your presence as a soothing balm is just kind of weird in my opinion. Right, and then we have the Twilight Domain, and then we have the Druid class. So again, additional spells. They do have a Wild Companion. So this is a 2nd level feature. You essentially use one of your Wild Shape uses for the day, and instead you cast the Find Familiar spell. The familiar that you create using that spell is considered a fae instead of a beast, and it lasts for a number of hours equal to half of your Druid level. So it is a 2nd level ability. So at first it's only 1 hour, but as you go up, again, it will continue to improve. Then there's like cantrip versatility, which again, similar to what we have with the Druid, or the Cleric, where they can swap out. Then we have the Druid Circle. So we have Circle of Spores, which again, I feel like that was in the Ravnica book. I'm not 100%. Like I said, it's been a long couple of weeks, but I will look into that and either, like I said, include it as a pinned comment or somewhere. But it looks very familiar to me. It could also just be that those were some of the Unearthed Arcana things that I actually ended up reading through. So that could be that as well. We also have the Circle of Stars and the Circle of Wildfire. Then we get into our fighter options here, so they get new fighting styles. One of the things I actually really like about this is they have blind fighting, which gives you blind sight within a 10-foot range. And then anything outside of that, you'd use your normal senses on. But I like it because, it's something you could give to like an Underdark race to justify their ability to fight even in magical darkness or without being able to see properly. Or I always thought it'd be kind of neat to make like a blind swordsman type character. So this makes it a little bit easier to actually use or to create something along those lines. They also have some like martial versatility, where whenever they gain ability score improvement, they could swap out their fighting style with another one available to fighters, or a maneuver if you take the Battlemaster class. There are some different maneuvers in here as well. Then we get into the new archetypes, including the Psi Warrior, or like the Psychic Warrior. This is a subclass for fighter that grants them certain psionic-like abilities. It's not the same as the Psychic Warrior from like 3rd edition or 4th edition. But what they do get typically is they get dice, psionic energy dice, that they can use. The number of dice is, I think it's equal to twice their proficiency bonus. And they get them back after a short or long rest. And they start with the D6, they go up to a D8 at 5th level, D10 at 11th level, and D12 at 17th level. And you use those and they can fuel some of the abilities that they grant you. Like I said, I'll touch more on that later in the video, what my thoughts on that sort of is. We also have the Rune Knight, which is kind of neat. And then we have something I actually really like here are the Battlemaster builds. So these are just suggestions if you want to make certain types of fighters. If you want to have a certain theme to them, then these are some of the things you may want to consider, like fighting style, maneuvers. Again, this is for the Battlemaster archetype, which is one of my favorite archetypes in all of 5th edition. I loved the Warlord class in 4th edition, and the Battlemaster is essentially, very similar to that. So it's really cool, kind of cool to see that, including the Pugilist, which I just really like that word. Anyway, moving on, we have got the Monk. I'm not going to lie, I really haven't looked at the Monk too much. It's my least favorite D&D class. I apologize for like the Monk fans out there. It's just not my cup of tea. If you like it, that's fine. I'm not gonna, I'm not saying that my decision is the best. I just don't particularly care for the class. But anyway, I will have to look at them, I guess, a little bit more at some point. But anyway, so we got some Monk options there. So here we have the Paladin. Again, there's Paladin spells that you can add to the list. There's also fighting styles, and one of the things that I actually kind of like here is that you have what's called the Blessed Warrior. So if you select that as your fighting style, you actually gain cantrips, 2 cantrips from the Cleric spell list. So the Paladin and the Ranger don't have cantrips by default. So this is a way of being able to gain them. You do lose out on any other fighting style, abilities. But I just, it's just cool to see that you can finally get cantrips. And with this, whenever you gain a level in the class, you can actually replace one of your cantrips with another one from the same spell list. So again, that's kind of neat. Then we have the Sacred Oaths. So we have the Oath of Glory, Oath of the Watchers, and yeah, like I said, I haven't read this too much. This is an early impressions video after all, so I'm just going to touch on the things that I was personally excited to look through in this book, and then the full review, I can talk more about each individual class abilities there. Ranger, we have the Druidic Warrior, same thing as the Blessed Warrior. It's just they draw from the Druid spell list instead of the Cleric one. But we also have Favored Foe. So this actually replaces the Favored Enemy feature, so it is a substitution. It's not an additional one. It is a substitution feature. But this is really cool because it finally allows you to deal extra damage to your favored foe. So with this one, You basically can choose a creature. You mark a target for 1 minute or until you lose concentration. So it is similar to a spell concentration. So that is important. If you cast a spell with concentration while you have someone marked as your favorite foe, you lose the mark of favorite foe. So just keep that in mind. And whenever you get hit, you have to make that Constitution saving throw to avoid dropping the ability. However, the first time on each of your turns that you hit, you actually deal an additional d4 damage. And I do like the fact that this does specify that it is the first time that you hit, because I've been in situations where I've had players decide to, they weren't playing a ranger, they're playing a rogue, but they decided to apply their sneak attack, not to the first attack that they got that hit, because they had a build that gave them a second attack. But they chose to do it on the second one because they rolled a natural 20 for their second attack roll. So I like the fact that it actually specifies the first hit, just so you can sort of avoid some of that like cherry picking kind of situations. And the dice does increase, so at 6th level it goes up to a d6, and at 14th level it goes up to a d8. So again, we've got the different fighting style options, some new things here that you can get as well, some new optional features. And then we have the Fey Wanderer for the archetypes, and the Swarm Keeper. I got to be honest, I was less interested in the archetypes than I was the favored foe ability. But again, just because they're not my interest doesn't necessarily mean that, nobody else will find it, because I'm sure there are people that will absolutely love playing like a Swarm Keeper. It's just not my thing, but again, it is an interesting ability, I guess, or an interesting concept. Then we also have some Beast Companions. So these are just Primal Companions. So instead of having the regular companion feature, you can get like Beast of Land, Sea, or the Sky. Then we got the Rogue. Again, I haven't actually read too much. They only get one optional feature called Steady Aim. So this one here just says, as a bonus action, you give yourself advantage on your next attack roll on the current turn. You can use this bonus only if you haven't moved during this turn. And after you use the bonus action, your speed is 0 until the end of the current turn. So again, just sort of, so once you use it, you're locked in. All right, yeah, sorry, it gave you advantage. I forgot what the benefit was for a second. Then we have the roguish archetype. So we have the Phantom. So many rogues walk the line between life and death, risking their own lives and taking the lives of others. So it's, I don't know, it's kind of an interesting concept here. Ghost walking, Death's Friend. Then we have the Soul Knife, which is another psionic option. Again, they don't get like psionic powers the way that we've known them in the past, but they do get psionic power, which gives them, again, like the dice that they can use to fuel some of their abilities. Sorcerers up next. So again, with the Sorcerers, they get some new options, metamagic abilities, Sorcerer's Versatility. So you can replace one of the options you chose for your metamagic feature with another. This is when you gain an ability score improvement. Replace one cantrip you've learned with another. Again, whenever you gain a level that grants you an ability score increase, so you choose one of those. If you want to, magical guidance, so you can tap into your inner wellspring of magic to try to conjure success from failure. When you make an ability check that fails, you can spend 1 sorcery point to reroll the d20. You must use the new roll. So that's actually kind of neat as well. So then we have, for the Sorcerer's Origins, we have the Abhorrent Mind, which again is sort of a psionic type of character. They get what are called psionic spells. So these are ones that so it says you learn additional spells when you reach certain levels in this class, as shown on the chart before. Each of these spells counts as a sorcerer spell for you, but doesn't account against the number of spells you know. Whenever you gain a sorcerer level, you can replace one spell you gained from this feature with another spell at the same level. So you can sort of switch these out as you go. The new spell must be a divination or enchantment spell from the sorcerer, warlock, or wizard spell list. So there are some caveats to it, but so we have that. We have the Clockwork Soul, as another option here. And again, this one I just wasn't too keen on either, so I can't talk about it too much here because it didn't make me want to read it. But that, again, that's something that could always change. The Warlock, so we have some stuff here as well. Pact Boon Options, Pact of the Talisman, Eldritch Versatility, which again, just one where you reach a level that grants you an ability score increase. You can swap out certain aspects of your class. Eldritch Mind, you have advantage on Constitution saving throws that you make to maintain concentration on a spell. So that's one of the invocations that you can take. So yeah, some cool stuff there. Otherworldly Patron, so we have the Fathomless, the Genie, and okay, I guess that's it. And then we move on to the Wizard. So the Wizard gets cantrip formulas. So what's kind of neat about this ability, so it says you have a scribed set of arcane formulas in your spellbook that you can use to formulate a cantrip in your mind. Whenever you finish a long rest and consult those formulas in your spellbook, you can replace one wizard cantrip you know with another cantrip from the wizard's spell list. So again, it gives you a little bit of versatility there. I actually kind of like that. I think it's a decent option. So that's one that I would have no problem allowing. We also have our arcane tradition. So we have Blade Singing, which I can't remember if this was printed in Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide or not, but again, this one also looks familiar to me. We also have the Order of Scribes, so they have abilities like Awaken Spellbook, so using specially prepared inks and ancient incantations passed down by your wizardly order, you have awakened an arcane sentience within your spellbook. While you were holding the book, it grants you the following benefits. You can use the book as a spellcasting focus, which, okay, I thought you could with tomes before, but maybe I was wrong. When you cast a wizard spell with a spell slot, you can temporarily replace its damage with a type that appears in another spell in your spellbook, which magically alters the formula for this casting only. The latter spell must be of the same level and as the slot you expended. So I guess just a way of changing energy types. When you cast a wizard spell as a ritual, you can use the spell's normal casting time rather than adding 10 minutes to it. So that's actually a pretty decent one. Once you use this benefit, you can't do it again until you finish a long rest. But if you needed to do something that's a ritual in a pinch, you can do it a little bit easier there. So that's some of the abilities there. And then we're going to get into the feats section. So with the feats, there's, again, some interesting ones here. I'm not going to talk about them too much. They still, some of them still suffer from some of the aspects of 5th edition feats that I don't particularly care for. Like, you're supposed to give up an ability score improvement to take them, but many of them will still grant you a bonus to a specific attribute, which means you only give up a +1 instead of +2. And yeah, it's set, but I don't know. I don't really like that aspect of it, but there are some really cool feats in here, including several initiate feats. So I actually really like these. They sort of give you some light versions of abilities that certain classes have. So for example, we have the Artificer Initiate. So you learn one cantrip of your choice from the Artificer list. You learn one first level spell of your choice from that list as well. Intelligence is your spellcasting ability. You can cast this feat's first level spell without a spell slot, and you must finish a long rest before you can cast a spell again. You can also cast the spell using any spell slots that you have. So you could, if you have spellcasting slots already, you could, mix them up a little bit there. You gain proficiency with one type of artisan's tools of your choice, and you can use that type of tool as a spellcasting focus for any spell you cast that uses intelligence as a spellcasting ability. So again, I like these because they're a way of accessing other class options without the multi-classing, which I really don't like. D20 system multi-classing, like for 3rd edition or 5th edition, I don't care for it personally. But these initiate feats I actually really like. There's also this chef feat. So as part of a short rest, you can cook special food provided you have the ingredients and cook's utensils on hand. You can prepare enough food for a number of creatures equal to 4 plus your proficiency bonus. At the end of the short rest, any creature that eats the food regains an extra 1d8 hit points. With 1 hour of work, or when you finish a long rest, you cook a number of treats equal to your proficiency bonus. These special treats last for 8 hours, and a creature can use them to eat to gain temporary hit points equal to your proficiency bonus. So again, just kind of a neat little stuff there. But yeah, so we got that. We have the Eldritch Adept, which is sort of like, oh no, Eldritch Adept, sorry, that's not the Initiate. But we also have Fighting Initiate. Then there was, I believe, I thought there was another one. Oh, I might be wrong there, but at least like I said, with the Initiate feats, you could easily work them to start getting like some other types of classes. So you could use those instead of traditional multi-classing, which I actually kind of like. You also have feats like Poisoner, Telekinetic, Telepathic, Slasher. Kind of interesting. And then we get into group patrons and just sort of how all of that works. I think this is sort of similar again to information that was given in the Ravnica book. So just again gives you some different options here, different things that you can get, including quests, contacts, roles, different stuff like that. And these are actually really, really great for building adventures around or designing campaigns around. So I actually really like this section of the book, and it's something that I would definitely recommend checking out and trying to implement into your campaign, because again, there's some really cool suggestions in here. You can flesh out some really interesting NPCs and create some very cool stories just based off of some of the things in here. So again, great stuff. It was one of my favorite parts of the Ravnica book, and it's done really well here as well. So again, this is a really cool addition to the D&D game that I definitely recommend checking out. And then we got our magical miscellany. So we're just going to go through this pretty quickly. We've got some different spells, including the Green Flame Blade. So there's that reference. Yeah. So again, new spells are always good. Nothing wrong with having some new options. There's some summon spells in here, which I don't think we had a lot of in the player's handbook. So it's always nice to have some more of that. We also have Tasha's Mind Whip, which is, you can see here, and Tasha's Caustic Brew, which makes me concerned about what's going into that cauldron of everything. Then there's some information on personalizing spells. So you can maybe change things up, for example, that might affect things like the appearance of the spell, the color of it. Like one of the things that I always did was have Magic Missile be personalized to the person casting it. I had a player who made a sorceress based off of Elsa from Frozen. So all of her magic missiles would look like little, mini snowmen coming out. So yeah, it's just sort of some neat stuff that you can do that doesn't really change anything, but just, again, adds an interesting personal touch. There's also these magical tattoos, which are kind of neat. You can get some that, affect energy. I can grant you like an energy resistance or an immunity like once. And then I think you heal some of the damage that you take as well, which is kind of interesting. Or it's based on the type of tattoo that you put on there. But again, interesting options for some items. And we just have some new magic items mixed in with some artifacts. So for example, Baba Yaga's Mortal and Pestle is actually an artifact. But there's just other magic items around it. Not crazy on the fact that they're intermingled with each other, because like artifacts traditionally have been separated out. But they're in here, so I guess it'll be easier to find if you're looking based off of alphabetical listing. So it is what it is. Souls of Taroka. So again, this could be kind of cool if you have the Taroka card, the Taroka deck. I think these are all the same cards, names. I'd have to go through that again. But if it is, it's cool because it can give you extra uses for that deck if you bought it for the this Curse of Strahd, or if you got the special edition collection set there. And then Dungeon Master tools. So again, some useful stuff here. This is another very good chapter of this book. Information on Session 0. So having a session that's all about character creation. Going over some, social interactions, game customization, and then we get sidekicks. So sidekicks were introduced in the D&D Essentials kit, which is a starter set box set. And what's great about these is that they're a great way to fill in a gap if you have a smaller group than, like, if you only have 2 or 3 players, for example, you may want to give 1 or 2 of them sidekicks to sort of fill out the party. And maybe, like I said, if you're missing a healer, or you're missing a skilled character, or you're sort of missing a fighter type, then you can create them using these sidekicks. And the beautiful thing about the sidekicks is, generally speaking, the player plays a sidekick, and you don't have to do it as the DM. So you don't have to create a full NPC. They can create their sidekick, and it is a great option. And yeah, so this is what I would recommend over having a full fleshed out NPC that you control. Let the players decide on these sidekicks. So yeah, we got the warrior, you have the spellcaster, and then you have the skilled character, the expert. Parlaying with monsters, again, could be a useful section to try out here. Is environmental hazards. So again, this is really cool. You have supernatural regions, so things like the Far Realm, if sort of bleeds over, the characters end up going there. Haunted. This one I actually really like. I would love to run like a haunted house style scenario. So this is one that I will definitely try to get some use out of. Infested could also be a cool one to use. A little bit gross. The mirror zone is also kind of neat. So yeah, again, just some really innovative or interesting concepts here. And you have like psychic resonance area, region, magical phenomenon. There's just all kinds of really cool stuff in here. Mimic colonies, primal regions. And then we get puzzles. So again, information on using puzzles. Puzzles, I don't use them much in my games. I know some people really like them. Some people really dislike them. So you got to be careful with them. But this does give you several ready to go, ready to run puzzles that you can just sort of drop into your game if you wanted to do so. And they also include things like actually, what to do to give the players hints. So for example, they can make certain checks, ability checks or skill checks. And again, yeah, it's just, again, it's neat. And I might actually try putting a couple of these in here. Like I said, I don't normally use riddles. I think it's just because I'm not great at coming up with them myself. But I might try a couple of the ones that are presented in here at some point, because I think it might be kind of neat. And some handouts, and that is that. So overall, this is an interesting book. To me, it's a little bit of a mixed bag. There are certain things about it that I'm not super keen on. There are some of the archetypes that just didn't land with me. They just didn't really do anything to make me want to read through them. Generally speaking, there's a lot of decent ones, but there's just some that I just didn't particularly care for. The ability to customize your character in terms of like attributes, proficiencies, stuff like that. I think it's interesting, but I don't know if I particularly care for the approach to it. Like having the specific races. If someone playing, a dwarf or an elf or gnome, halfling, dragonborn, whatever, allowing them to simply choose exactly where both of their attributes go, I don't know, I don't really like that option. The main reason that I don't like it is I feel like it takes away from the human, because one of the benefits of the human class, the human race in D&D is if you take the optional one, which grants you the feat and then the extra skill proficiency, you get to choose 2 stats to increase by +2. And that's something that makes them feel a little bit special. With the other races, though, if you can simply choose where you put your +2 and your +1 bonuses into, I feel like it just sort of makes that aspect of the human just not that important anymore. I also don't really like the fact, and this is something that I've not been a fan of for a while, but I don't really like the fact that none of the races have a penalty to any of their attributes or stats. So, for example, if you're like back in the day, a dwarf would have +2 to Constitution, but would have like -2 to either dexterity or charisma. An elf would have +2 to dexterity, but would have a negative to Constitution. And like a half-orc would have a bonus to strength, but they'd have a penalty to intelligence or charisma, depending. So there was always sort of something to offset it. And I will say that if in 5th edition that the non-human races had +2 to a stat, had +1 to a stat, all of their racial traits, and a -2, meaning that if you use the ability to customize, you could put +2 into a stat, +1 into a stat, but then you have to put -2 into another one. I would honestly prefer that because it feels a little bit more balanced by the fact that there's that penalty. And if there's that penalty, then the human, again, starts to have all the things that made it different still apply, because they would get those +2 bonuses they could put anywhere, but they don't have any penalties. So I don't know. It's just, again, it's a personal preference thing. There were a couple of races that had penalties to their attributes, like the Kobold and the Orc. However, the most recent errata, I believe, completely erased those penalties. So it's a bit of a shame, because I, as a DM, would be much more inclined to let the players customize their attributes if one of them had a penalty to it. As it is, if I were to allow it, I would probably want a really decent background explanation as to why their attributes would be so different. I don't know. It's just, that's, again, just something for me personally. I don't expect that to be the way everyone feels. And honestly, I would just rather allow the players to, well, I'll get back to that in a second, because there's more to it than that. Several of the class options in here as well, I kind of understand, but the fact that so many class features or alternate abilities or extra abilities that are presented in here revolve around like changing your character, changing major aspects of your character, fighting styles, or other things like that, or even changing like archetypes and all those things. I'm not a huge fan of that per se. Again, I know the reason that stuff like that was included was to allow Adventurers League players to maybe redesign their characters to take advantage of the new options provided in this book, and I get that. But as a DM, what I would rather do, and what I plan on doing with my 5th edition group, is just simply allowing them to just respec their character now that this book is out. It's the same thing I did when Xanathar's Guide came out. If the players want to change their character to take advantage of an option from the new book, then they just had a free pass to do so. So that's something that I would probably do here again, and I think that that's just an easier solution than getting into the things where it's like, oh, well, whenever you reach a level that gives you an ability score increase, you can make those kinds of changes. I don't know. The concept is also kind of interesting, I will admit, to those ability score increase things where you can change certain aspects. Again, I would probably do it where you have to sacrifice the ability score increase to make those changes, depending on, the feedback from the players. But again, it's sort of, again, interesting that they included it. And I sort of, again, know the reason why, just to allow players the opportunity to take some of the new options. Which brings me to certain inclusions like the Artificer, like some of the other subclasses that I really suspect, I'll have to look through, but may have appeared in other books. Their inclusion is one of those things that I suspect it is largely done for Adventurers League considerations. When you play D&D Adventurers League as a player, your options are you use the Player's Handbook, and you can choose one other book to take options out of. So, for example, you wouldn't be able to take options from both Xanathar's Guide and Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. You'd have to choose one or the other. Certain things have been changed in the past to have them considered to be part of one book or another. So certain races, for example, that didn't appear in either of the Everything books could be considered legal if you chose those books. Like there were certain, I want to say like the Turtle race, or there was some other things that if you chose Xanathar's Guide, for example, you'd have the ability to take some of those races even though they weren't in the book itself. So having stuff reprinted from the campaign setting books, for example, into this one supplement, it makes sense for the perspective that not everyone buys every campaign setting book, and it makes sense for the purposes of making it much easier for D&D Adventurers League. So I understand why they made those decisions. If I had any real major complaint, though, because overall I think this is a really good book. Don't get me wrong, this is one that I would highly recommend checking out. And so, like, this isn't me saying that this is a bad book by any stretch of the imagination, but my one major problem with this book is the handling of psionic characters. I really don't like them being relegated to nothing but archetypes or subclasses of other existing classes. Now, their inclusion in this book may open the door for something like an actual psychic warrior class, an actual psionic scion class that has their own unique psionic manifestations that they can use, like the mind thrust and all these other abilities that they had before. The scion was done incredibly well. The psionics in general was done incredibly well in 3.5 D&D. Not 3.0. 3.0 was awful. But in 3.5, the scion was awesome. Like, they just did such a good job with it. And I really want to see that come back. I guess the fact that, like, the psionic options, like, it's relegated to, like, the scion type character presented here is relegated to a sorcerer subclass. It bothers me from the perspective of thinking of things like the Dark Sun campaign setting, where arcane magic and psionic abilities are two very different things and affect the natural world of that campaign setting. Like, arcane magic destroys the world. It actually kills living things in order to fuel the arcane energy. So having psionic abilities be a subclass of an arcane spellcaster just doesn't really make sense if you wanted to apply it to the Dark Sun setting without having just a fully psionic character. And with the way that 5th edition is done, honestly, with having spells that you can cast at higher levels for additional effects, but they don't automatically level up, it's basically the same thing that we had for 3.5 psionics. It's just they have spell slots instead of psionic power points. So it would be really easy to make a scion for 5th edition, because the framework is basically there. You just change the spell levels into, like, a certain amount of points you have to spend, and then each levels higher that you want to empower the ability by would just cost you a certain number of points. Like, it's something that I think would be a really easy thing to do. Now, I hope, like I said, that having some psionic options here opens the door for a dedicated psionics system, because again, I think that they did it really well in 3.5, and I think that the 5th edition spellcasting framework is already very similar to what psionics was in 3.0, or not 3.0, sorry, 3.5, just with levels instead of PowerPoint requirements. So that's something, again, that I'd really like to see. Other than that, though, again, there's a lot of great stuff in here. Some of it is reprinted, but again, it works really well. You get the full fleshed out companion rules, or sidekick rules, I should say, which was a great addition to the Essentials kit, but now we have them for all 20 levels of character progression. That's a great system. There's a lot of cool magic items. So there's a lot of interesting options for classes as well. Just not, it's hit or miss with those, but that's, always, I think, going to be the case. So at this point in time, I would say my early impression is that it is a bit of a mixed bag, but there's more stuff in here that I like than stuff that I don't care for. So I would recommend checking it out, heading down to your local game store if you wanted to pick up your copy of this book. I think it is definitely worth owning. It's just a question of what part of the book are you going to use more than the others, for example. Which of the options are going to resonate with you versus the ones that you may not particularly care for. And again, the idea that stuff is reprinted, yes, there is stuff that's reprinted, but there are considerations as to why that does make sense. Like, again, Adventurers League requirements and stuff like that, and just the fact that, again, not everybody buys campaign setting books, so reprinting stuff from a campaign setting book into one of these hardcovers, it's not the first time that's ever happened. It is definitely something that does carry some precedent behind it. So yeah, I don't mind that aspect of it. And again, the psionic part was disappointing to me, but if it means that we see an actual Scion class later, then all is forgiven. So Anyway, that's my early impressions and flip through of Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. Sorry that it's a bit longer than the typical videos that I do, but I just wanted to sort of show everything, talk about the things that caught my interest from the very beginning, and just sort of get those early thoughts across. So the full review should be out, I would say, probably within a couple of weeks of this one. It just depends on how things go the next little bit. Last couple of weeks have been a bit on the rough side, so we'll just again see. Hopefully that's behind me now. But anyway, thank you once again to Wizard of the Coast for sending this to me for the purposes of this review. I really do appreciate it, and I want to thank each and every one of you for taking the time out of your day to listen to me ramble. So thank you very much. It really does mean a lot to me. And check it out, Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. Check it out from your local game store. And if you go to your local game store, you can also pick up the special cover, the Hobby Store Game Store exclusive cover. All the contents inside the book is the exact same, but you do get this fancy looking cover that you can only get at your local game store, which is where I always recommend picking these things up to support those businesses. But again, thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Share your thoughts, Tasha's Cauldron, in the comment section below. I always love to see what aspects of the book you love. And yeah, thanks again for watching. I'll see you next time. Take care.